All right, at 6 o'clock, I'm calling to order this regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Bandera on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. All council members are present with the exception of Lynn Palmer. Our city attorney is here, our city administrator is here, our city secretary is here, and Marshall Bill is here. To be heard, in case you don't know, emails can be sent to the city secretary 2 hours prior to any meeting. The governor's decided that we need to hear from the public. So the next time there's any meeting of the city council, please feel free to send your questions or comments 2 hours prior to the meeting. Item 3 is a consent agenda. Item A is approval of minutes for the meeting held on May 20th, 2020. Item B is approval of an employment contract with Jay Horry to continue serving as city administrator of Bandera.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Jerry seconds both items. All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Okay, the regular agenda. Item A, discussion and possible action on the following items. A is discussion on ethics with City Attorney Dan Santee. Dan?
Yes, Mayor. The mayor asked if I would come out to the meeting and just go through a portion of the Code of Ethics, particularly Division 3. And it's a good idea when we get new members of council and when we do new board appointments to kind of do a refresher on the Code of Ethics. But I would also, for our new members, you know, there are Division 1 and 2 as well in that first part that goes over your procedures that you need to be familiar with. But tonight we're going to talk primarily about the Code of Ethics. Not all city councils take the step of adopting a Code of Ethics. I just want to, you know, again commend Bandera for taking that step in the last, gosh, you did this within the last year, I think. It's critical, particularly now with the world of politics as it is, to make sure that your citizens have confidence in the work being done by this council and by the boards and commissions that you appoint. Part of that process is making sure that you hold yourselves to a standard that you would probably expect if you're with any company that y'all are doing business with or any of your private companies that you oversee and run. We want to make sure that the public, because we're their employees, right, in a sense, that they have that same level of confidence with the work that we do here. Whether we agree to it or not, when we sign up to be a public official, whether it's appointed or elected, or when we're going to be an employee of this city and have the seal of the city on our uniform, we go around town, we are held to a different standard by our citizens. And we have to live up to that standard. And so, absent the adoption of a code of ethics, we don't have any way to hold our appointees and each other accountable, right? So we're not a home rule municipality. We do not have a charter where the citizens can act to recall members of the council, or where you can have a council investigation under the charter provisions to hold employees or board members accountable. So instead, for a type A general law community, we make our own law, right? We adopt a code of ethics and we put it in our city code. So we adopt it by ordinance so that it can be enforced. Now, in Division 3, this is a fairly straightforward code of ethics. We state in our statement of purpose, we're telling the citizens why we're doing this and what they have a right to expect. And that is primarily fair, ethical, and accountable local government. And I don't know of anybody who's ever run for public office who said anything other than that. But when it's in the code, we're going to for sure abide by it, and we want to make sure that we do. In the definitions, one of the things that is important is that when we define city official, okay, the reason why that's critical is remember that you have of the boards and commissions that you appoint a planning and zoning commission, you appoint the economic development board of directors. Are there any others that you actively appoint, or do y'all do all that? Y'all do the rest of the heavy lifting. Okay, so you got those two. Neither of those are final decision makers, right? Everything that they do has to come back to the city council. So one of the things that you'll find when you look in Chapter 171 of the Local Government Code, that when you talk about definition of what is a public official, it's going to specify that they have to have some final decision-making authority in order to fall under the provisions of 171. Now, so what happens? So that would mean that your planning and zoning commissioners wouldn't be a public official, so they don't have to abide by 171. And that is accurate. They're not the final authority for the approval of plats. They don't fall under 171. There are two conflicting attorney general opinions on that. One by Dan Morales that held just that if you have a planning and zoning commission where they don't have final decision-making authority, they're not a public official, but if they do, they are. And then we have one by Ken Paxton, who didn't apparently read that full opinion and said, hey, we've already decided that planning and zoning commissioners are public officials. It's like, well, not exactly. Got to read the whole opinion, Ken. It makes a distinction between having or not having final decision-making authority. That's why we put that in here, right? So that's why we have a code of ethics at the local level. If your planning and zoning commission or your board of directors at the EDC fails to comply with this local provision, this is irrespective of any bylaws or any statutory provisions that they're operating under. This is local, and you have a right as the body that appoints those boards and commissions to hold them accountable under this code of ethics, just like you're going to hold yourselves accountable, just like you can hold the employees accountable. But that's why here we define city official differently than what the local government code defines city official. It's anybody that you appoint. Section 103067 just talks about recognizing the stewardship of the public interest is our primary concern. One of the things that I've been, since my time coming out here with Bandera, that I've been impressed with is a continued effort, striving to be more transparent, trying to be more open with your public, trying to make sure that y'all abide, that the employees are carrying out and abiding by the Public Information Act requests that come in, the Open Meetings Act. I've seen the efforts by the council, by whoever sat in those chairs, to make sure that you're acting in the public interest and complying with the law. 103069 talks about the professional and personal conduct. The professional and personal conduct of city officials and employees must be above reproach and avoid even the appearance of impropriety. City officials and employees shall refrain from abusive conduct, personal charges of verbal attacks upon the character or motives of other city officials and employees, board, commission, and committee members, and the public. Now, what does that mean? Do you want examples? I mean, not from this city, of course, but from all my other cities, I could probably provide examples. But let's just leave it at this, okay? Is that there are going to be spirited debates in EDC meetings, in planning and zoning commission meetings, in this room. I've been here for them on occasion. There's nothing better for democracy than good spirited debate, right? But there's lines. There's lines that now you're holding yourselves to and abiding by and vowing not to cross. So we can disagree with respect for each other without calling names. And I'm not saying any of y'all are doing this, but that's why this is in here, right? This is in here because we're telling the community and ourselves that we're not going to engage in that kind of behavior. We're not going to have abusive conduct, personal charges, or verbal attacks upon the character or motives of other city officials. I can disagree with your opinion respectfully all day long. I can say I disagree with it in 100 different ways, but we're not going to cross the line. And the reason for that is obvious, right? You lose the confidence of your constituents. They lose confidence that you have their interests at heart and you're going to do the right thing because of the personal attacks that go back and forth. 103070, city officials and employees shall perform their duties in accordance with the processes and rules of order established by the city council and boards, commissions, and committees governing the public deliberation of public policy issues, meaningful involvement of the public, and implementation of policy decisions. So there's a process for everything. And you've laid out in Division 1 and 2 what that process should be for those items coming in here. This is respect for that process. We don't bypass that, right? You as a council appoint Jay and the city secretary. As a body, as a council, you can give them direction, right? By the same token, the Planning and Zoning Commission works closely with Keeley or with Jay or with Jill But what we want to avoid is any individuals, right? Any individual member of that commission, the board, or the council coming directly and not respecting the process, giving direction to an individual that maybe or may not be the wishes of the entire council. I don't know if that makes sense, but often I get calls from council members in various cities asking me a question or saying, I think we should do this. Can you do this? And my answer is, I can. And if the council directs me to do that, then I shall do that, right? And just gently redirecting that conversation to make sure that there's an understanding that I think it's a great idea. It's not up to me. I will take my direction from the body that appoints me and not from any individual. Conduct of public meetings. I don't think we need to go through that much. Decisions based on merit. City officials and employees should review material, participate in discussion, and base your decision on merits and substance of the matter at hand. One of the things that is, I believe, covered in here as well is that often there's absolutely nothing wrong with city council members and boards and commissioners doing their own research outside of the meeting, gathering information, gathering data, and bringing that to a meeting. It's much more productive if you find good information like that, because I know I've received information from Mayor Schauber, I've received information from Jerry, I've received information, Rebecca, ahead of something. That's what we want to do. If you find something that's about an item that's on the agenda, share it with your city administrator so that everybody has it.
Gracie,
You're going to make better decisions
what are you doing?
for that meeting if
What?
if he's able to get that information in the packets for everybody to have so that they're not up here hearing it for the first time. 103073 is your conflicts of interest and disclosures, where it talks about all these different sections of the local government code or the government code. Understand that if you go to those sections, they're going to talk about public officials, and we've defined it differently. So if you violate this, council's different, but if your P&Z, for example, violates the provisions found in 171, they're not going to be charged under 171 because under the state definition, they're not a public official, but they are here. So it would be a violation of the ethics code. Corruption under 103074 are the penal code sections that would be applicable for city officials and employees. 103075 is political advocacy. Here's what that's not saying. That's not saying that you can't be politically active or advocate for the election of somebody, right? This is referring to city officers only, and this is referring to city time, city resources. We don't want employees on city time wearing city clothes, logo, things such as that, advocating for or against a particular candidate. We don't want the use of, so I had an instance where the request was to film a political ad. The request came into the city. A particular candidate wanted to film an ad, an advertisement, political campaign advertisement at City Hall. And the city had a policy that said, no, you can't use city resources. You can't even give the appearance, I don't know that their intent was bad, but because that city had a policy in place that you wouldn't use any images of the city or the city's logo or anything because it didn't want to be seen as endorsing a particular candidate. That's kind of what this is aimed at dealing with. It's not like a local hatch act, I guess we'll put it that way. That's not the intent here. It's just a discouragement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there anything as a city official that, as far as political, that we should or shouldn't do or can't do? Or not
So,
an idea to do?
So what I would refer you to is the election code and the section on candidates. So when you're a candidate, the rules are slightly different, as y'all probably all know, than when you're not up for re-election. And so you do need to be familiar with the election code. And the Secretary of State has great resource material for candidates, and they even have it broken down by state office and local office. And then they're also going to refer you back to your charter. We don't have one. And so you would also reference your code of ethics and things such as that. So yes, is the short answer. Yes, there are things you should not do or be aware of as a candidate, different apart from when you're sitting on the council.
That's what I was
Confidential information, this is an important one, 103076. You need to, again, I know a lot of this goes without saying, and so please, I'm not lecturing any of y'all, I'm just making sure that we've gone through this, because if you're like me sometimes, you get so much information, maybe you don't always read it when you get it, so that's why we're walking through this. Confidential information is 103076 on page 13. City officials and employees shall respect the confidentiality of information concerning city property, personnel, or proceedings of the city. They shall neither disclose confidential information without proper legal authorization nor use such information to advance their personal interest. Here's the reality. EDC board members, Planning and Zoning Commission board members, and city council members, y'all are privy to information. You have access to information. The general public does not have access to it. And you know this, right? Because you have a special right of access as a local public official under the Public Information Act, so long as you're acting in your official capacity. And so this is in here just as a reminder to all board members that never access that information and never use that information for your personal interest or for your personal. 103077 is very similar, but it has to do with public resources, use of public resources. 103078 talks about being a steward of the public interest, so you should refrain from representation of private interests before other boards, commissions, or committees or proceedings of the city. So example that I've dealt with before is when I have had an attorney on a council or commission, or if I've had an architect or engineer on a council or commission. This is saying that you should refrain, because you're a council member, from representing those interests in front of other boards or commissions. So for example, if I'm, as an attorney or an engineer, taking an item as the agent for my client before the Planning and Zoning Commission, because I know they're making they're going to refer that item to me as a city councilman. So that's a no-no from an ethical standpoint. Almost all of those matters can be handled by someone else in your firm or in your business or something such as that, so there's not an appearance of impropriety. On advocacy, 103079, this has actually come up, I know, before in discussions we've had out here on ethical situations. City officials and employees shall represent the official policies or positions of the city council, board, commission, or committee to the best of their ability when designated as delegates for this purpose. If you're sharing your individual opinion, you need to state it as such. So what this means is that if this council selects one from among you to go to a meeting, or if you're a liaison for a board, when you go, it is assumed and required that you represent the views of the council, right? And if you're just there to listen and report back, that's fine. But often you will be asked a question. All of y'all have been liaisons. You know they're going to ask you, what's the council think about this? Well, this is just reminding you that when you're there as an advocate, as a representative, you are there for the body, not individually. And you need to distinguish between your individual opinions that you're absolutely entitled to as a citizen of Bandera versus the official position of this governing body who only speaks as a body. On 103080, this is referring to the policy role and the structure of everything we have here, understanding that you have created the office of city administrator, right? That does not exist in the local government code. That is a local public official that you have created. And within that creation, you have delegated certain authority and responsibilities to this gentleman to my left. And what this is saying is do not interfere with those duties once they've been created and assigned, right? So I've had this conversation, not with Jay, but with other managers and administrators, when they take direction from a council member. And I've told them, they said, well, what do I do? I was like, well, don't take direction from a council member first and foremost. They can't direct you. What? I was like, no, they can't. They created a position, they delegated authority, they've hired you to do a job. If one of them comes to you and says, go do this, and you go do it, that's on you. That's not on that body. However, if a quorum of that body says, go do this, you better get over there and get that done. That's the difference, right? And so all this is pointing out is respecting that administrative hierarchy and the policy decisions that the body has put in place, whether it's with the city administrator, the city secretary, or the city attorney. Y'all created that, you can uncreate that. You can change those duties and responsibilities. But once it's done, that's what we're going to follow, and that's what we're going to respect. Now, if Jay does otherwise, that is on Jay, but don't put Jay in that position. Jay's a good guy. It puts an administrator or a city secretary in a very, very tough position because they work with you so closely. They respect your authority and the position, the office you hold. They don't want you to be upset, and they don't want you. They want you to trust them, right? They want to do good, but you're putting them in a tough position if you come and give them direction. And that's the same thing with your boards and commissions. You've appointed them, right? Speak as a body only. Don't approach them individually and tell them they're doing a bad job or that they need to do this differently or that differently. And that's what section 103.081 is referring to. It's talking about the independence of your boards, commissions, and committees. Once they're appointed, you can give, as we've been through recently with the EDC, you can give policy direction and guidance and things such as that as a body and hope they as a body adopt those things and follow those things. And if they don't, you can remove them and you can place other people in those positions. But we don't we don't do it any other way, right? We don't go try to bypass any of those formal processes for addressing that and take it up individually. I think that is pretty much it. So what we try to do is that newly appointed or newly elected officials should be given the copy of the full code to review, sign off on. The ones you appoint are expected to sign off on. Compliance and enforcement, what happens when people violate this, right? So we're not going to issue citations, even though this is an ordinance and it's part of our code. Instead, what it talks about is that city officials and employees themselves have the primary responsibility to assure ethical standards are understood and met. The chairs of boards, commissions, and committees and the mayor have additional responsibility, okay? Under this code, the chairs of the boards and commissions, plus the mayor, have additional responsibility to actually intervene when city officials' actions appear to be in violation of the code of ethics and conduct and are brought to their attention. So the mayor, because she doesn't have enough to do anyway, right? So we've given her more responsibility to intervene if she knows of anything, any conduct that might run afoul of this. The city council may impose sanctions, such as reprimand, formal censure, or loss of committee assignments on city officials whose conduct does not comply with ethical standards. And the city council may also act to remove members of boards, commissions, and committees from office. Now, y'all can't remove each other from your elected positions. Only a district court can do that. But you can censure fellow council members if the whole council as a body decides to do that. You can remove committee assignments from that council member. You can publicly reprimand a council member. And with your boards and commissioners, you can do those things too, but you can also remove them. So for violations. Now, what we don't, what is not in your code of ethics is any formal process. I've seen some cities go to great extents having a formal process. I can tell you how it's been handled here before is it's placed on an agenda. There's a public hearing. You can talk about some of these things, or you can talk about it in closed session if need be. But remember, when it's involving something such as this, they can ask that discussion take place in open session. So, questions?
Thank you, Dan.
She can be in here for that. All right, item B is Eric Emerson. Presentation by City Engineer Derek Nizer of LNV on the drainage assessment. Now, this is part of the flood infrastructure fund. Thank you. with the Texas Water Development Board project. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks. Rebecca and I have talked to a couple of administrators. Well, you've talked to administrators, we talked to administrators, and I've talked to administrators. We've all talked to everybody. So Derek is putting together a proposal for council to take to a preliminary application. Texas Water Development Board has a process that requires a preliminary application with an administrator and engineer. And then if you're invited to participate in the program, you submit an actual full application. You go through the procurement process, you get an administrator, you get an engineer, and you move forward with the process. This is just to get our foot in the door. Hopefully, we can get this submitted. It's got to go in June 15th. So we need to get rolling on this. And Derek, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can y'all hear me okay?
Hi, Derek, yes.
Yeah, as the Mayor said, we've kind of been working with staff and we've put together, I know y'all are looking at the riparian improvements there along the park also. But we were asked to take a look at a few drainage. Let's see. Am I going to be able to share my screen, or does this? I got a message that said host disabled participate screen sharing. Can I have access to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay. I'll tell you what. It's not.
Jonathan did it earlier. Is he with you?
Jonathan,
Yes.
Jonathan is separate. Jonathan, can you share the screen? Start out with the Maple Street, please. If yours will let you.
Let me, host has disabled screen sharing.
I didn't. No. Let's see.
Let me see. How do we work around this
Let's
earlier?
see. Is that you, Jonathan?
Yes. I could try it again.
Technology. Gotta love it.
May I?
It's still not allowing me to share.
I don't know. Derek did just mention the riparian project, and this piece is something that Jay and Derek and the mayor felt it was really important to get in, to do in coordination with the riparian project, because it's relevant with the stormwater runoff. So this is something that hopefully we're looking at putting in together with the green project, this green engineering and gray engineering.
Okay.
And then having that green piece is helpful with the percentage. It increases the percentage that would be grant as opposed
Okay, it's gonna let me share my screen now.
Okay.
I did
Yay.
briefly touch
Okay.
base on that again after.
All right. Sorry about that little glitch there. If
Can
we-
There you are.
Y'all see my screen?
Yes.
You.
All right. I'm not sure what screen y'all see, but is my mouse moving over Maple Street?
No, we see you. We see you.
All right. Let me try this again. How about that?
There you go.
There you go. All right. So just kind of, we looked at a couple of different drainage projects that we kind of provided some cost data on. We did kind of a quick look over the last couple of weeks. This right here is Maple Street, the shaded blue thing there from basically 173 to 8th Street, right along the park. Right now it's about a 21-foot paved section with just, kind of not really a ditch, but just a grassed swales on each side. And what we, as part of the riparian project, y'all were talking about doing some improvements to the bank along the park. And one of the things that y'all, the presentation I sat in on several weeks back, they talked about some of the erosion. As you know, there's quite a bit of runoff that comes down 8th and 9th and 10th and 11th Street and cuts through across Maple Street and then, causes erosion and some different issues there along the park and then eventually at the bank of the river. One of the things that we thought would be an alternative to look at or consider would be to put in a curb and gutter section along Maple here, that whole blue shaded area. And if you kind of go pan over to the typical section, Jonathan, what we did was we put in a 40-foot face-to-face curb and gutter section with 5-foot sidewalk on each side. And basically what that would allow for is two-way traffic, 24 feet down the middle with parallel parking. They're labeled shoulder here, but that's 8 foot is a width for parallel parking along the roadway. And so it would improve the park entrance and area there along Maple Street from 173 to 8th. We also, if you can go back to the map, Jonathan, for the drainage, we put in our estimated a underground storm sewer system, which is kind of simply identified by that yellow line there. And it would go down and catch the runoff along 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, anything that gets to Maple Street from up the hill, and carry it in underground storm sewer that would discharge below the dam, kind of like on the adjacent to TxDOT's right of way there below the dam. So, that would eliminate, the flow and runoff that comes through. What we did was like a 25-year design in engineering lingo, frequency, and it would capture that. Anything above that, of course, would run over, but it would greatly reduce, any flood events larger than that as far as a runoff. The frequency that you have, problems with erosion, and then also the volume that you'd have even on bigger flood events.
That's right.
Does anybody have any questions as far as what we looked at there, or what we're kind of proposing here for consideration?
When we do the discharge back into the river past the dam, what is that going to do to the rivers, to the properties downriver?
Well, the flow, we're not really changing, where the water, all we're doing is moving it from discharging overland into the lake area there above the dam. So we're still taking, the same flows and runoff that would get to the river, and from a overall flood, I guess, or a water surface analysis on the river, it wouldn't really have any impact, because what affects the flood flows on the river are, substantial range upstream of the city along the Medina River.
Well, I guess my question though is we've got 1,800 feet of it going this way, and all of a sudden we're taking 1,800 feet of it, shooting it out that end. Is it going to substantially lift the water level, whether even shortly or just for a little while below the dam?
As far as flood impacts along the river for the map floodway, it really wouldn't have any effect. You're taking the flow, and instead of it coming in overland over a period of 1,800 feet, you're concentrating it in one spot, taking it to the river.
That's right.
Hi, Derek. This is Rebecca Gibson. May I ask you, I have a couple things, but firstly, how is this underground drainage constructed? Like, what is it?
It would basically be large diameter concrete pipe that would go and have a series of inlets at 11th and a series of inlet at 10th, 9th, and 8th. And so it would start off naturally bigger at the downstream spot. I think we estimated in our cursory analysis that we did about a 60-inch pipe at the outfall. And then of course it would get smaller as you go upstream towards 8th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's underground. It would be put under, under the pavement or behind the curb or under the sidewalk, and then connect to those inlets that are capturing the runoff that comes down the ditches or the side of the pavement along 8th, 11th, 9th, and 10th.
So my follow-up question about that is, are you aware of, or can you imagine any other type of engineering that would achieve the same purpose in terms of like a low impact development piece or something, a more natural solution?
Yeah, I mean, y'all, I mean, whenever I saw the presentation that the group put together, they talked about having erosion control measures or some type of grass way, they call it low impact, sort of like water gardens or different features like that the water would flow through to kind of spread it out and keep it from eroding. There are other measures you can do. Yes, as far as, when you have large flows, those things work well with small flows because, just of the area and the volume of water that we have coming, down the hill on these streets, especially on 8th and 9th. And I think when you have significant events, you're still going to have water going over or through those and towards the river on the banks. So, but there are, I mean, there's other treatments that you can do. We were just trying to look at something that would improve the part of the project that would improve the drainage in the area, but also give you a pretty good improvement as far as access and aesthetics for that major area for access to the park.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about this part of Derek's plan?
No,
Proposed plan?
And
Derek,
this one
go on to the big ditch plan.
This one right here, we estimated we have a budget cost that includes construction, contingencies, engineering, go up to the top where we have 2.5, roughly say 2.5 million. So pretty, significant project. Okay, we're gonna go, any questions on this one before we go to the next one?
No, I think we're good, Derek.
Okay, Jonathan, if you could go over to kind of another area that we looked at, kind of been, I guess, discussing issues along this drainage way with staff for a while, and wanted us to take a look at some improvements, what we could do for a project along this. Everybody is familiar with this. I don't know that it has a name. If it does, y'all can let me know now, but this is a drainage way that comes in over here by the RV park along Maple, and it kind of goes across an area there, some pecan trees, and goes underneath 16 TxDOT structure, and then through over to Cedar, and then from Cedar it crosses 173 Main Street, and then it goes back around the low water crossing on Hackberry, and then a small structure on Pecan. And of course, this drainage way goes all the way up towards the cemetery on the kind of the northern part of the city limits. But we kind of looked at this portion all the way up over to Cherry. We were looking at making improvements that included, let's start on the downstream, Jonathan. We looked at raising the road profile there at Maple Street, putting in a box culvert. We did a 25-year design frequency for our cost estimating, and then channel improvements towards 16, and then of course channel improvements towards Cedar, replacing that structure under Cedar, possibly reprofiling the road if need be, to get a new structure that is adequate size, and then channel improvements towards 173, concrete lined, and then concrete lined back towards the area there just downstream of Hackberry. And then in this section here, we kind of looked at, it was kind of pretty challenging area. We looked at putting kind of an underground system in all the way from Pecan to that point, just because of all the infrastructure and the business back there along that drive behind the city property there to the right of Hackberry. So And then once we got to Pecan, we looked at improving the channel. We priced out sort of like a concrete U channel because you're very limited on space there because of the residential area and the yards coming right up to that channel. So we put together an estimate, and let's back out $3 million, and we kind of broke it up here just so you can kind of see what some of the costs are. That first section really is one structure and channel improvements, about 330, and then to go from 16 over to Main Street, about 400,000. And of course, the most expensive part is the section that kind of goes behind City Hall and Library across the county property there, and then back up to Cherry at a little bit over 2 million. So, we looked at these projects, just for consideration in the fifth. I know, I think the city can actually put in multiple applications from when we discussed with staff earlier and a grant writer, and based on our experiences with working with other clients. So you're not just limited to one. You could submit, multiple abbreviated applications that are due on June 15th, but pretty quick hitter. It has to be done and turned in. I think June 15th is when the deadline for the abbreviated applications. And they're abbreviated, don't require a whole lot of detail and a whole lot of information, but pretty quick timeline.
Derek, how much leeway do we have once, we say, okay, let's go forward with these, then we're invited to apply, we fill out the application, can we change our scope of work at that point?
That's a very good question. I would kind of defer that to the grant administrators that are maybe more familiar with the rules and some of the application procedure or process. Question I have not asked. I've been asked. I don't know, Jonathan, have you been asked or seen an answer or somebody discuss that in the past? No.
Well, as far as I know, with a bridge application, it is very broad. If we're going for a drainage project for this area, as long as we stay in those lines, it's not so much as changing the scope of work. Now we want to change locations and type of project, but based off of this preliminary design, if we want to, instead of do box culverts, we use channel. That's still within the scope of work because we're not getting into the weeds with this application, if that's your question. So if we get approved for this project, it's for this project. If it's what the design is, whether it's lid applications or open channel, whatever, that's in the weeds in the design process. If that makes sense, if that answers your question.
I think so, and I was actually going to mention a similar question. I did hear you, Derek, mention, lining the drainage with concrete, and I just wondered if there might be some opportunities throughout to do some green infrastructure. So maybe have more of a combination of the gray and the green.
Yeah.
Now, what about? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were.
Well, I was going to change the subject. So if you had something on that, I'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, the areas that we have with concrete, I mean, once again, once we get into design, I mean, we had to put something together to estimate. As we have a lot more detail on what we estimated, but I was trying to leave it broad. Just because we show concrete lined in certain areas doesn't mean we can do something different. If it makes sense and we can do it. I mean, that you can do, gabions and stuff that kind of have more of a green look where vegetation can grow, or you can do kind of like natural channel design and stuff. Naturally, on the green sections that we have for earthen channels, we'd want to remove some of the thick vegetation in the channel, but we'd want to leave as much as we could and kind of make it look as natural as possible. And at the same time, just providing a adequate section to carry, the design flows that we're looking at. So And then another thing that I'm gonna put in here, because one of the things we didn't include is the cost for easements,
Mhm.
because that's something that I don't know, because of the quick nature of trying to put something together here. I'm not, I don't know if easements are going to be an issue, or if folks are going to welcome some type of improvements to some of these areas to enhance the property and contain the flow better. So, I mean, that's another thing that, a lot of it is across, the county property there and the city property on that one section. But there are other areas where, there are no easements, and we'd have to look at acquiring access or permission to get in and do some work and improvements in a lot of those areas that are labeled green or blue.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, so I'm glad you answered that. The two other points that I'd like to make are in the kind of some logistic things, maybe. I think you might be familiar with the new design for the water runoff from the hotel. I don't know if you've seen that. Their plan is to redirect their water. So where you have the beginning of this project there on Cherry Street, the stormwater runoff from the new development and from the Dollar General will be coming down Cherry Street to enter that waterway.
Yes.
And I don't know how, is it a retention pond that they're doing behind the Dollar General, Jay? No.
There's not any retention ponds I'm aware of.
Okay, but their design puts the water through on
Yes,
that path.
through a channel,
Okay,
yes,
through
ma'am.
it.
From what I've seen is from
Sorry.
what I've seen, they're taking the water and kind of at that point over there behind Dollar General where the dumpster pad is, where it kind of holds water anyway. They're going to put some kind of an earthen swale behind Dollar General that'll take it to Cherry. And then it would drop into existing inlets there that are in this picture, the top left corner, right across the street from where our blue line ends. So, we would not be going
right there, right?
Yeah, it goes underground. And that's not the main flow. The main flow actually goes underground across 173 and over there, and then underground underneath the some of those buildings. I'm not sure what the names of what the businesses are in there.
Mi Pueblo, Green Joe's, behind the laundromat.
Yeah. Yeah, so it goes all the way. Like I said, the flow from here. I mean, this drainage way drains a significant portion of the city, and of course, and it goes all the way up, all the way up to 12th Street, and then down 12th Street to 173, and the high point would probably be somewhere over there around where the cemetery is on 173 on the north side of town.
Okay, I have one other thing, and then I'm gonna stop and let somebody else talk. On Cedar Street, you mentioned possibly you mentioned that section of road, and I don't know if this is something that needs to be decided by council, or if I'm just gonna throw it out there. I would love to see that redone, and I would also love to see the improvement include more pedestrian-friendly access, because it is a highly walked area. I mean, it's a very narrow path right there for cars alone, but also just to make it safer for pedestrians. That improvement was a little bit more substantial right there.
Yeah, well, we're right now, as you can see, a pretty good price tag with $3 million. When we did structures, we tried to take into account what we estimated was, and we're kind of getting into the weeds of design. I mean, let's see if we can get the money from, the state and Texas Water Development Board, and then we'll put it to use. But we estimated structures that were long enough to widen the road to 24 feet and add 2 5-foot pedestrian sidewalks, thinking of future, even if we didn't build it with this project, it would be wide enough so that if you ever wanted to come in there and improve and put sidewalks down both sides and all that, you could. So we didn't really put a whole lot of street work in here because we were trying to focus on, drainage dollars. We do have utility relocations because, for example, that box that goes underneath Cedar right now,
Mhm.
there's a 6-inch water line. When Jonathan and I walked through it the other day, there's a 6-inch water line that goes right through the middle of that thing, about 1.5 feet up from the ground. So,
Did you go in there?
oh yeah, well, that's pretty clean. You can see the picture there. But so I mean, whenever we had utility conflicts, based on the city base maps for water and sewer, we did include the utility adjustments in our price. So, and those can be significant in some areas. So, you're talking about, adjusting, 70, 80, 100 foot of water line, or maybe moving a manhole and redoing some sanitary sewer to move it over so that you can get a box in. So we did coordinate that and look at those costs. And, I imagine, go back over to Maple Street area. You can see Maple Street, we did hatch in an area because right now there's no structure underneath there. It just flows over the road. And so if we're going to put a box in there and carry a 25-year design flows underneath the roadway, we'd have to raise it up a section going each way to where we get to a grade where we can tie into, and without, we're not making a big hump. Don't misunderstand, but we're raising that whole roadway up for, 150 foot section. So in those areas, we did include roadway work. The other areas, it's just whatever you need to put in your box culvert and go. I think, we've been involved with Water Development Board, clean water, drinking water. And, once you have these dollars and you get into the project and you get into design, I think there's an opportunity where if you have cost savings in certain areas, you can maybe spend that dollars a little bit different way and offer amendments. And I'm sure that this project has to be the same way, because kind of goes back to your question earlier, we're doing an abbreviated application right now. And we're not really required to present a whole lot of detail as far as cost, but just to put some kind of a dollar figure and a conceptual plan in there. So I would assume that when we get to the big application, we got to flesh that out a little bit better, and they're going to want a lot more data.
Anything else, Council? I just want to point out, for those of you who haven't been here like 100 years, right here at Cedar Street, Maple, where the chicken coop is, water has actually reached the level of the patio that's outside coming over Highway 16. So there's a huge volume of water that goes through there. I think this is really necessary to go all the way to the beginning and bring it all the way down through. And then I'm going to talk to y'all about financing, because that's where it gets really interesting. So, Derek, any other comments, Councilor?
Yeah.
Suzanne.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to ask one question, Derek. These red lines, that indicates the box culverts?
Underground.
Yes, sir.
Box culvert.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yes,
hearing aid on. Sorry, I don't wear one. Why are we putting box culverts in? Why, that ditch is already an open ditch and it can serve that purpose. Why
Well,
not leave it open?
right. And I'm gonna, for what we did here, Councilman, we kind of had to, we didn't go out there and survey, we were using that data from, what we can get, from Google Earth, and we did do some measure downs with the city staff on some manholes and things. But so this is conceptual. This is a challenging section here because you have a sanitary sewer, you have that large riprap embankment that has a toe down at the bottom coming off the backside of the city hall and the station there. You have utilities, other utilities that are in there, such as power lines and underground communication cables. And then you have, going over here, I'm going to say southeast of Hackberry, that concrete drive that comes off the low water crossing at Hackberry. is kind of like where the water goes over that area. And then you have the city property there, and then you have a business back here. You know, when you look at putting, like, say, raise that low water crossing at Hackberry and try to put a structure underneath there, what do you do with the access to this part over here that goes, is that a pizza shop over there?
Mhm.
Right.
To the pizza shop, you know, how do you have access to that? Do you have to rebuild this whole thing and raise it up and then so to answer your question, what we did was we looked at a couple of quick alternatives, and we said, let's estimate something that is going to be kind of a little bit more than your average cost for this section, something that would cover it. And then if we got into a detailed hydraulic study with better survey data and everything, we would look at those alternatives and see if there's something better. What we priced here was putting a box in all the way from Pecan back past that driveway at the pizza place, and then leaving kind of an overflow where if you had it, because if you still got to take into account if you have a large event, like say 100-year storm, well, if you're designing your system for 25, you got to have somewhere for that water that's larger than that to go. So it would basically follow on top of that existing grade that's there now, is kind of what we priced out or what we estimated. But, you know, we would, you know, like I said, we probably over the last week probably had about 3 different scenarios drawn up here, and we had to price something. So that's what we priced for now.
Okay, so that is an option.
Does that answer your question? Or, I mean, like I said, this isn't,
Yep.
I don't know that this is final. This is just an indication of something that we priced out that would work, and felt like if we changed or modified or did some other stuff, it would also allow us money to do that within that same budget.
I think that's exactly right.
Thank you.
Anything else for Derek?
Thank you so much, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you all.
What? Is he staying? It's leaving?
Hang on.
Thank you.
He's smiling. He's ready.
And done.
Get out of this one.
Bye, everybody.
And I'll still be available if y'all have any questions.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Okay, let me talk to you, council, about finance of this project. This is through the Texas Water Development Board, the Flood Infrastructure Fund. It's a special fund that's set aside. It can be as much as a 45% grant and a 55% zero interest loan, which means for every $1 million, if it's, let's say 60-40, let's say it's 40% grant and 60% loan. That's 600,000 per million. If you spread that out over 30 years, it's 20,000 a million. So if we get
I'm sorry.
20,000 per
Per
million.
million.
Okay.
So if we get $6 million, the city is obligated to $120,000 a year at a zero interest loan. This stuff doesn't come along often, folks. Now, if we go green, which is the riparian stuff that we've been talking about in the park, those numbers.
And in these projects. I mean, there's
Yeah,
elements. that
all of
go
these
with it.
projects, but if we could roll this in too, make another application, this is an opportunity we just cannot pass up. Drainage in our town has been a disaster for years, and I think we need to get started on it and take advantage of this. So if y'all decide to move forward, this is how we're gonna go. Yes, Joe.
Just repeat that again. So come to 120,000.
Okay, if for every $1
For
million
600,000.
that we get, let's say we get okay, let me break it down easier. For every $1 million at 60-40, we're obligated to pay $600,000. 400,000 is grant, 600,000. Okay, now you break that down over 30 years, that's 20,000 per year per million.
Okay.
I don't have my calculator.
And Bill did it too,
Yes,
remember?
I remember.
Because they're doing it 2 million. But anyway.
And
go ahead.
just, if I may, combining what we had talked about before, the park project and the right period growth, that was something that council had reviewed just at the last meeting and had approved to move forward on the grant application with. But by tying these two together, it gives us potentially more grant opportunity for this larger cost
Okay.
by putting them together, because if so much of the overall project is nature-based, that helps increase the grant side.
Okay.
That makes sense?
When would you know by how much? I guess after you submit.
Yeah.
Hear back,
Yeah,
so we don't.
but there are
know.
estimating tools, and the estimate
Oh,
is
okay.
45% grant,
Okay,
which is a big deal.
and that's for yours. So
Sorry.
it should be pretty easy
Yes,
to get 45.
yes, yes. That was calculated. It's all formulated, and so one of the people we had spoken with about this project had calculated that for us, and he's an expert. So.
Have you seen any negatives in this whole thing? Is there any times?
Say again?
Anything negative that you could think of?
I could see
Anything
nothing
on the
that-
board, maybe I'm missing? Because it all sounds so good. It's almost hard to believe.
almost stupid.
Yeah, that's why.
Well, the bottom line is it is an expense. I mean, I guess that's the difficult part, because it is a large expense over time. But like Mayor Strawman said, the zero interest loan it's a unicorn. This is a
Yeah.
unicorn of a program. It's really very special and unique, and it's a huge opportunity to get this type of improvement done. That's what this fund is for, and it's really great that we've actually discussed this specific project for years and kind of have been waiting for an opportunity like this to come up to help finance it. So it's very exciting.
Did you get a time limit on how long this takes?
I think the fifth has an 18-month timeline for their project, but don't quote me on that. But I do
So
think
we could get this done in 18 months once we start, potentially? Is that what you're?
I don't think 18 months was put on it.
was it not?
I don't think.
Okay,
so.
I apologize. I thought I
I
read.
think it depends on the scope of the project.
Okay.
Are you gonna do it in stages?
Well, for instance, we're working with Texas Water Development Board on our drinking water system, and we're moving forward to it. It'll be a 3-year project, will it not, Jay?
Well, total, it's gonna be about 3 years.
Yeah.
We'll be starting to see some more action on that in the
But
very
on
near
this, it
future.
would be all or nothing, right? I mean, we get the approval and we move forward with both projects,
That's what I'm understanding.
ideally.
I mean,
Yeah.
we get the money, we gotta do it. But, you know, there are timelines, there's requirements we have to meet, there are certain things we have to do. So the first thing we have to do is do the abridged application. The second thing is to be invited to the party.
Mhm.
And then once we're invited, then we send them, or we pick an administrator for real, we pick an engineer for real. We send them a project and we sit back and we answer 15,000 questions a day until we finally get it.
How do they decide whether you're gonna be invited or not?
We don't know.
That's
Oh,
for
really?
their board
That's their-
review.
Little secret. huh?
Well, I have shared some information with you on the standards and criteria. So they're just gonna make sure that the project checks all the boxes.
Okay.
It's just going, I
Yeah.
suppose it's just going system
Yeah.
similar to what we do for our different seating and G.
Cool.
Okay, then, that being said, since we don't have anything on the agenda to move forward with the discussion, we can go on to, I would like to skip down to item D, because this would probably seal the deal if we're gonna get an administrator to move
Mhm.
forward with the project. So we can move down to item D, please. Any
You're gonna
further,
read item D?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
any further discussion on item C? D, B, whatever. Okay, let's move down to item D. Discussion of the responses received, selection of a grant writer for the city's submission to the Texas Water Development Board Flood Protection Grant Program. I don't know what it is, but that's okay. And this is for the free app only, guys, the
Abridged
the
application.
abridged application. because they don't really give us time to go into real procurement. So you'll see in your packet, there is an email from Judy Langford as from Langford Management. And another one from Bill Moriarty, who we talked to last week. And I think, Rebecca, you want to speak to Bill?
May I? Well, I was gonna make a motion, if I may, and then we'll open it for discussion if that's acceptable. Make a motion to appoint Bill Moriarty as our grant writer for the abridged application.
I'll second.
I know that Langford has worked with the city of Bandera on a lot of projects over the years. And we've always had really good experience. So this is by no means to slight their efforts or their quality of work. What I was introduced to Bill kind of on one of our Zoom calls that Jay and I were on with, or maybe I was just on, I don't remember. But it was through my work with the Hill Country Alliance that his name came up, and he was recommended because of his expertise in grant writing and specifically with nature-based solution projects. What I have come to find out since then, and another kind of feather in his cap with his tremendous experience, is that Texas Water Development Board actually hires him to write the manuals on how to fill out these applications and go around to cities to train people on how to fill out these applications. So he's a real expert in it. And while the Flood Infrastructure Fund is a brand new program, so it's new for everybody, he's so thoroughly versed in Texas Water Development Board programs and projects that I just feel like he's a great person to do the job. And because Hill Country Alliance had kind of used him as a resource to ask questions on behalf of the city in the past, he's kind of, in a sense, he's already started, complimentary, just because he was used as a reference. So he's kind of ahead of the game, and we only have from now 12 days to get this done and submitted. And that's going to require a lot of work, and he's, like I said, he's ahead of the game. His fee for this is $4,400, and the Hill Country Alliance is offered to, they have a grant program, and they're going to pay for half of that. So it comes to what would be $2,200.
Nice.
Yeah, the only thing to say to that is that, and again, Rebecca, I was on that call with you, and I have total confidence in his ability to do this.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that Langford would do it at no cost. But again, it's his experience with Texas Water Development Board that he's a councilman.
Yeah. And I'm not really sure how the rest of the Langford piece works, because in their other programs, are they taking a percentage of the overall grant as their?
They've always taken 30,000.
Okay, I didn't know that.
But we've never worked with them on a Texas Water Development Board
Okay.
project.
Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask you a question?
Of course.
Whom do you prefer, or do you prefer either one of these?
I think either one of them would be a great choice. I will say this for Bill, his experience over the past 35, 40 years probably outweighs Langford a little bit. And if you talk to him, you will see that he has always worked toward water type projects. His name has been around for as long as I've been doing this, which is really too long sometimes.
I understand. Okay,
But I think if you flipped a coin, you would not have a bad choice.
Either one, either or. One would save $2,200 or so.
Yeah. Further discussion,
Well,
council?
This short amount of time, I wouldn't want to take a chance. This guy sounds more proven than me. That's, for $2,200, I feel more comfortable that
That's good.
things are gonna get through and done correctly. Go.
Okay, everybody good with that? All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. All right, Mr. Bill, you got the program. Well, let's get back to item C. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending the city of Bandera's Code of Ordinances, Chapter 6, Health and Sanitation by adding Article 6.04, solid waste. This should not come as any great surprise to you, but we do not have a solid waste ordinance until now.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Why do we need one?
Why do we need one?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dan.
So, right now, you have no regulation on the disposal of waste in your city.
Okay.
So you have a contract for solid waste collection, but you don't have any provisions or local regulations for the disposal of that waste and how that's done. And so most communities have a solid waste ordinance that governs that. So in the absence of that, there are health and safety code provisions, which is a state violation in the state matter on those things. Otherwise, you're trying to enforce. So you have a contract with a collector, right? But you don't have any means of enforcing anything when they notify you that someone is not abiding by the terms that they've placed on you to hold them to in the contract. So typically what you want to have is a solid waste ordinance for the disposal of solid waste that complements the contract that you have with your collector, so that you have a means to enforce against citizens or businesses who don't comply with stuff, because otherwise the collector is going to hold you responsible for those problems through your contract.
What I'll be really frank here, the piece I don't agree with is, I personally take issue to, is that it's a requirement to pay for this service with your utility account. Does anybody else see that as an issue?
Well, yeah, I've had issues with it in the past. But I also understand,
Just clear one.
well, I've had issues with not being able to decide myself who I want to use. But I also see a reason for it.
Which is what?
Well, one, you know that the waste is being picked up, for one, and it's done properly. Just more uniformity, I think. And I don't know that you can get a better price on your own anyway.
Well, I want your help here, if I may, Dan, because what I don't want to do is violate the ethics code. But I want to speak from personal experience, but it's not about personal interest, so I'm clear, right? I think so.
You play with us.
If I have a tall kitchen bag every 2 weeks and that's all I throw away, I don't want to pay $30 a month for a garbage service. Do you know what I mean? And I'm responsible. I'm obviously not letting garbage pile up in my house. Then I would be in a violation of some type of nuisance if I did something like allow my property to get filthy with garbage. Is that accurate?
So I was just talking to Jay, so I was not even aware that you did not have a requirement that your citizens use the service provider. So, so I hear where you're coming from. Typically, however, your best rates for the citizens are going to occur if they are all required to use whoever you select, as well as a franchise fee to the city for awarding that exclusive. You have that exclusive right now. The city, as an entity, decides who can collect trash within the city, period.
Right.
And the rates for that collection are going to be best if the person that is getting the contract understands that they are the sole provider of service within the city. To your point, you're correct. If you are a single creator of solid waste, right? You're going to generate less waste than the other person. But depending on how you establish your ordinance and what your contract is going to dictate what those fees are. So if you have curbside for everybody in your community, every residential customer in your community, then that's one price for whatever that individual tote is. If you have shared dumpsters, then that's different as well. It just depends on your individual setup. I have other communities where, in your circumstance that you reference, they have different size totes that they've requested from a provider because of that very reason. There's no reason for me to pay for a 96 gallon or whatever it is if I'm only generating this much. So that particular provider, I'm not going to name names, but that particular provider is willing to provide different size totes to account for that.
I just said, I'm not interested in forcing people to purchase a product that they do not need.
Jerry?
Where would they get rid of their waste? How are they getting disposing of their waste if they don't have a service picking it up?
I know what I do, but I don't know what
I
other
know
people
what other-
do.
We have a lot of elderly people that come in, because I'm here every day and I see it, that are like you, and they only have a bag, and they take it to the dump, and they charge them $1 per bag, and they're like, I don't want to pay $30 a month when I get charged $1 a bag to drop it a half a mile down the street.
Now, are we talking about restaurants or?
No.
businesses,
No.
Or we talking about
Residential.
individuals? Like
Yes.
if my home worker, we throw our garbage out. Yeah, I'm not going to say,
What's that?
sorry.
Uh,
Whatever we
Making it
don't do.
mandatory?
Yeah, making it mandatory for everybody to do it, because most of us follow people, homeowners. We bag it up and throw it in our dump, and they pick it up. I think that's right. Sorry, Mayor, there's.
Do you have a number of how many utility accounts do not also have an associated trash service?
I don't right now. I
I'd
mean,
like to know.
it's not a big number, but I don't have the exact number. I can get it, send it to you in the morning.
Jerry?
My concern is that if it's not a requirement, that people are going to look at the easiest way to dispose of their trash. I deal with it, by the way. I do have people come in using my dumpster. In fact, just last week, I had the company put up signs on my dumpster, saying it's against the law. So that's one of the reasons I would be for it. It discourages people from just dumping their trash wherever. And I catch people all the time, and I'm sure a lot of them are from outside of the city. But at the same time, that's why they're doing it, is because they're not required to have it picked up. So they just swing into the RV park and load up my dumpster.
That happens to me at the coop a lot, mainly because we seem to forget to lock it back up. But, I'm paying $198 a month to be a public dump site.
Yeah.
So I don't think we ought to require at least some sort of, if you, I don't know, if you opt out, what do you just haul it out of town? What do you do with your trash?
Since I started recycling all my plastics, cardboards, and cans, it has reduced my garbage
Do every month.
significantly. So I take everything to the county, or my dad lets me throw it in his green nose dumpster.
Yeah, well, see, there are people like that.
Yeah.
Who have access to other things, but there's so many that don't.
Well, that's why I want to know how many people don't have the
That
trash
is a
account.
great
Is this
question.
really relevant?
Should be addressed.
Another question is, can we pass the ordinance without requiring the service for the
Would
consumer?
you like to table this?
And I'd like to also know what, because I know we decided last time that we were going to look into other options, and because the contract Republic is coming up, that we'll be going out to bid for service, or we can potentially to see what other companies are offering. So can we revisit this at that time and make more of a holistic decision?
I would like to do it prior to that. Unless council wishes to make a motion in a second. and
Well,
move
can
on.
I interject something here, because this is the other item I was out here on. So how this began was Jay asking me about an RFP for solid waste collection services, right? And so my question to him was, well, yeah, we need to make sure we include with that RFP a copy of your ordinance, your solid waste ordinance. And he's like, funny thing about that, we don't have one. I was like, well, then we're putting the cart before the horse here. We really need to make sure that we have your ordinance the way you want it, because it has to be part of that RFP. Because any respondents to an RFP are going to want to know, how many commercial accounts do you have? How many residential accounts do you have? What's your franchise fee? Are they required to use us as a service? Because when they're required to use them as a service, including construction waste, then your rates to your customers, to your residents, are much more reasonable, because they know going in what they can bid, because they know the total number of guaranteed accounts that are available in that community. And in the last 18 months, I've probably seen at least six RFPs go out from communities, small communities, and they've never failed to generate multiple responses. The other issue that you have is your current contract is up in September, and it requires 60 days notification if you want to renew it for an additional 5 years.
Mhm.
So that's the other reason. I don't think Jay or I anticipated action tonight. Right? I got this to him last week. He hasn't even had a chance to go through all of it to see what would be applicable or not be applicable. Provisions that you don't want in this code, that's fine. Just understand that there's going to be ramifications. If it's not mandatory, then that affects the rates you're going to be able to get on an RFP if you go out, or even what your current provider, if they renew the contract, what rates they're going to charge those who do use the service.
Okay, I just want to clarify on required to use. Living in the city of Bandera, I can't go to a different company. So if I'm gonna have a trash service, it does have to be Republic. So it is a requirement to use them if you have a trash service.
There's no mechanism by which to enforce that.
Okay.
So
But
a lot of
I'm
people
good with
aren't aware
that
of that.
piece of it.
Right. Well, now the whole world knows, I guess. So, I mean, without an ordinance, they're going to hold the city accountable, though. I mean, the city is in the contract is probably doing the billing for them. So they're going to expect that amount every month.
Sure.
I'm with Rebecca on the fact that I definitely would want to see numbers. How many people aren't taking advantage of it before you can make any type of decision. I'm open
I'd
minded.
like to ask Jay a question. Jay, are we having any problems now with people doing, other than dumping in my dumpster over here?
No, that's the most common thing. We see them come up here and throw stuff in.
Let's just make it a fine. Let's find somebody if they come
Catch
from
them.
out of town.
That's just it. You have to actually catch them in the act.
Oh, I'm hard on mine.
Well, it
It's
is.
a major fine in
Yeah,
place.
it is illegal dumping, but you have to, the police officer has to catch them, basically.
I'm just not for raising prices on our citizens. We've done this so many times. I'd like to just forget it.
I would like to see some options, because I would like to see that people have the ability to make the choice themselves. I'm for that. But I would like to see the options that might be available.
The council would like to table this to the next meeting or even further down the road than that.
I'd like to see it come back to us when we have input from what other companies, and I'm going to I'm attending a free webinar on recycling. It's about cities starting programs, so it's really relevant, and I'll share back if I have any insight from that too.
Hang on just a second. The point of this ordinance is to attach it to the RFP. So we need to
Oh,
decide
I'm
on
sorry.
the ordinance prior to sending out the
Well,
RFP.
then next
So
meeting.
June the 14th would do for everyone?
Sure.
And we'll
Sorry.
get some response back by then? Okie dokie, June the 14th.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go to item E. Consideration of possible approval of a professional services agreement with Simple City Design for an update of the city's master plan and authorize the city administrator to execute the same.
Motion to approve.
Rebecca makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
They are.
It's still-
All in favor, none opposed. All right, item 5, request and announcement. Item A is request by council to place items on a future agenda. Anything, council? Thank you very much. Item B is announcements by council. Announcement, Jay, Jill, council, anybody? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
Rebecca makes a motion to adjourn. Everybody seconds, including Don, Jerry, and Rosie. All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you all.
7:25.
Thank you.
Good job, Rosie.
Yeah.